Meeting. I have the pleasure of calling the meeting to order until we have elected a new chair, at which point I will turn the meeting over to the chair. So I'll just make sure that Chris Pearsall is ready for notes. Assuming so, we'll get going. All right. So I will call the meeting to order at 6:01 p.m. And my agenda has disappeared. But I think we will take we'll take public comment before we get into the reorganization. So if you have a public comment, if you can put your virtual hand up. Right, and I see Nancy Cornell. Go ahead, Nancy. You should be able to unmute, I think.
Thanks. Patrick. I just wanted to say a couple of things. I understand that Patrick has invited our school principals to help us work through some of the financial issues we're facing. And I just wanted to say, I think it's such a great idea to do that, because principals know so much about our schools and our communities. They have a unique and invaluable perspective. They know the kids. They know the intricacies of staffing and scheduling. They know the budget. They know the buildings, and they know our towns. In some ways, they have the most comprehensive understanding of the context that nobody else has. And so it's great to hear that their voices are going to be honored and key in helping us find solutions. I understand that they've already begun to work on the project, that they're working within a set of realistic assumptions and realistic budget targets, and they're trying to create a picture for each of their respective schools and for the district of what teaching and learning would and could look like beginning in school year 22-23 in terms of staffing and intervention and professional support and scheduling and budgets. They're going to be working separately and together, I understand, and at least some of them will be engaging staff in helping with the work. And I understand the staff is eager to help develop solutions, especially solutions that might avoid closing some of our schools. So I also imagine that when their plans are ready, Patrick will invite them to join him at a board meeting, so the board will have a chance to examine their plans and ask questions. And I guess I just wanted to thank Patrick for getting this going, for unleashing the ingenuity of our principals to help us solve what seems to be an intractable problem. I think this approach could yield some surprising and workable results. And we might discover ways to provide kids with varied opportunities that meet their needs, ways to achieve equity as distinct from uniformity. And I think we might find that they've come up with ways to do business differently and effectively without trading away the benefits to kids and our towns that community schools provide. So Patrick, I just wanted you to thank you for doing that. And I look forward to hearing what the administrative team comes up with. So thanks.
Any other public comments? I don't see any other virtual hands up. All right, hearing no other public comment, I'll just check in to see new, that would be Sandra Lee. Welcome, Sandra Lee, as a new board member, but a familiar face to many. And re-elected board members, which I think are Steve, Sarah LaPearl, Krista Siringo, and Kevin Hansen. Congratulations on being re-elected. But I want to just check in with the 5 of you and make sure that you've had a chance to do your oath of office so that you're officially able to participate today. So I'm seeing Sandra Lee, Sarah, Krista, Steve. I don't see Kevin's face, and there's Kevin. Yes, looks like everyone's done their oath of office. Great. So you're all ready to go, ready to participate, which is good because we have an action item coming right up. And that action item is to elect a chair. We're going to elect the officers, but we'll start with the chair and then I'll turn it over. So this time we'll accept any nominations for chair of the MAUSD board. And just remember, nominations don't require a second.
I nominate Dawn.
All right, I think that was Annie nominating Dawn. Other nominations for chair? All right, hearing none. Dawn, I suppose we should check. Are you accepting of the nomination of chair?
Yes.
Okay, last call for any nominations. All right, hearing none, nominations are closed. Dawn is your nominee. All those in favor of Dawn Griswold being re-elected as board chair, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, please say nay. Any abstentions? All right, it's unanimous. Dawn, you're still the chair. Congratulations, I think.
Thank you, Dawn.
Thank you all for supporting and for allowing me to continue to be the chair. All right, so at this time, we'll take nominations for the vice chair. They, like the nominations for the chair, don't need a second. So are there any nominations for vice chair?
I nominate Krista.
Okay, Annie again. Any other nominations for vice chair? Okay, hearing no other. All those in favor of Krista as our vice chair, please say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Thank you, Krista. I didn't even give you the chance to say no. Sorry. All right. Now we need nominations for our clerk.
Nominate Liz. I think you're a clerk. Were you a clerk before Liz?
Yes.
Yes. If she's willing, I nominate her to continue.
Yep. Okay. Any other nominations for clerk? Okay. All those in favor of Liz Sayer as our clerk, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Continuing on, we need to appoint representatives to the Community Engagement Committee. Let's see, our current representatives are Krista, Rob, Andrew, and Liz. Is there one more? Kristen. There she is. She just popped in on my screen. You don't have to make them individually. If you want to make a group of people, nominate a group, we can, or a slate, we can do it that way.
I nominate the slate if willing.
Okay. Any others? All right, all those in favor of Krista.
I wonder if Sandy might want to do that. I don't know if that's something she might want to do. Being not new, but
I'd actually like to
retreaded, or what are we going to call it? I don't know. Just so to put it out there. I didn't know.
Okay. And Andrew?
I'd like to step off the committee this time around.
Okay. So let's see. That would be Krista, Liz, Rob, Kristen. Okay. I don't know. Sandy, is it too soon?
No, I'd be willing to be on the committee. That's fine.
Okay. And Krista, are you fine? So the slate would now be yourself, Liz, Rob, Kristen, and Sandy.
Yep, that's fine.
Okay. Anyone else? All right. All those in favor of Krista, Liz, Rob, Kristen, and Sandy as our representatives to the Community Engagement Committee, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Our next item is to appoint a board representative to the Patricia Hannaford Career Center Board. Currently, Steve has been filling in. I'm not sure where you stand, Steve, if you're wanting to continue. Oh, we're getting a thumbs up. So
I kind of have to because I'm on the negotiation team and I have a meeting tomorrow night.
Well, you heard it from him first. So he sounds like a self-nomination. Anyone else? All right, all those in favor of Steve continuing as our board representative to the Hannaford Career Center, please say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Okay, thank you, Steve. All right, and we also have to appoint a community representative, and our community representative has been Kim Farnham from New Haven. She loves taking on that helping us out with that and taking it on. So, and she's willing to do it again.
I'll nominate her.
Kim Farnham.
Okay. All right.
Who's also in this meeting tomorrow night.
All right. All those in favor of Kim Farnham as our community representative to the Hannaford Career Center, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. The next was an update that was included in the packet about the meeting schedule and agendas. Did everybody get a chance to look it over? Any questions? Okay. All right. Our next item is the consent agenda, and it's to approve the minutes from February 23rd, 2021. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved, Andrew.
Okay. All right. Is there a second?
I'll second, John.
Okay, thank you. All right. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please say aye.
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 All right. It happens you're all on the same page. So as long as you stay on my same page, I'll just look for your signals. But if you guys start spreading out, then I'll go through the roll call. Okay, just so you all know. All right. And our next item is an executive session, Title I, VSA 5313A1F, attorney-client decisions seeking legal advice. That is not one of the exceptions for going into executive session. So we first have to determine that premature knowledge would put the district at a disadvantage, sorry. So given that we can't get this information without going into executive session, as the attorney has told us, in my mind, that is the disadvantage. We need to be able to go in to hear it and then make our decision about what to do with the information. So I would, in my mind, that would be our disadvantage. So we first need a motion determining that disadvantage, and then we need a motion to go into executive session based on that information.
So moved, Andrew.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second, Kevin.
Okay. Okay. Any discussion? Okay. Sandy. Yes. Oh, you're muted.
Sometimes unmuting just doesn't work very easily. Sorry about that, Don. Just because it's my first meeting and I have tried to catch up, has it been clear what the subject matter is going to be that requires that we go into executive session for attorney-client privilege information, it sounds like?
Yeah, we've asked for a legal opinion on a question about our authority to take some action regarding the repurposing, I believe is how we framed it to the attorney. Is that correct, Patrick, how we framed it?
Okay. So it's based on what we received. Okay. Do we need to make our motion specific so that we know exactly what it is that so I know the motion was very general that was made, but my concern is it needs to be very specific so that we're clear about what we're going to executive session for.
I'm going to need to look at my notes a little bit. In the meantime, I'm going to hear from the other two who've got their hands up. Okay, Sandy, I'm going to keep looking though at the same time. Caleb?
I still don't really want to hear legal advice in this. I don't, and this dates back to the previous session of our board, but just a couple months ago. So I think it's fresh in everyone's mind. But basically, I don't think it's really great to get this opinion off the record. I think it's helpful in this moment to get the legal opinion on the record, and I don't really see the disadvantage. The idea that the disadvantage is that we can only hear it in executive session because our attorney has preconditioned his advice on, giving it in executive session is a bit circular. It's sort of just, this attorney is one who's been, retained by the superintendent and sure is qualified and good, but the board is still really just engaging their services, and to say like, well, I've got something to tell you, but it can only be off the record, to me, isn't a great look. So I would say this does not disadvantage the board to hear it in public, which is what I said before. So I'll leave it at that. But I know people have already received some information, so there's probably some impetus to just go into this session. But I would still say this is does not need to be an adversarial situation with our voters, and therefore I think just having the conversation in public leaves our board at a perfectly good position to move forward.
Okay, thank you, Caleb. And Rob?
Can you guys hear me? Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with Caleb. I don't see the need for a legal solution right now, because as a district, we don't have a legal problem. We have a financial problem. And I guess we would have a legal problem if we decided to move forth with Patrick's proposal unilaterally as a board, or a similar proposal that sort of fundamentally changes how our town elementary schools or our Mount Abe facility operate. So I don't necessarily think we need to go into executive session, because I don't think we have a legal problem. But like I said, we would, because we've already heard from an attorney representing the town of Lincoln. The Starksboro Select Board has also said they'd move forward with legal action. And so, I would encourage the board, if this is something we want to do, to just say, hey, like, whatever is going to be put forth down the road, you're going to have an opportunity to vote up or down on it. And that totally, I would think, would get rid of any possible legal problem we might have if we just sort of take the courageous step to just say, hey, if your school is going to look fundamentally different than it does now, you as constituents of that town, as the electorate, will have the opportunity to vote up or down. And I think if we put that forth right now, I think it'd be a major step in this process. Because again, we don't have a legal problem, and I don't think we need a legal solution if we do this the right way, honoring the Articles of Agreement, honoring the ambiguity of the Articles of Agreement, or honoring the spirit of the Articles of Agreement. I think if schools look fundamentally different, that we should give towns or the entire 5-town community the right to vote up or down on it.
Okay. Kristen Blanchett.
I think that we've set August as our time to make all these decisions. So I think it's premature today to vote on whether we're going to have towns vote up or down or make any statement about that. So I think that's premature. I think we need to do our timeline and think and not do anything spur of the moment. I don't even know if we could vote on that today because it's not on the agenda anyway. So I just wanted to comment on that piece of it.
And Sandy, I believe the reason would be confidential attorney-client communications made for the purpose of providing professional legal services to the board. I believe that's.
May I? So I did watch most of your January 13th meeting where I think Bill Mube was there and Andrew Snow were there, and it was there was a decision not to go into executive session. So I understand the value of executive session and an attorney-client consultation. I'm an attorney, so I do appreciate sometimes there's certain things you'd like to be able to express and ask your attorney. My concern is because we're doing this in executive session, I would want an understanding of what we would be able to communicate when we come out of executive session. I think if we're going to be discussing certain risks, to the district because of legal issues, and we have to make these decisions and vote on them when we come out, I don't want to be constrained by what we've discussed in executive session to really argue and discuss what my position is based on what I've learned. Normally I get to consult with my attorney and then I get to decide what to disclose when I'm making my position. Do you see? But we're doing this in executive session, and technically I believe we're not supposed to talk about anything that we've discussed during executive session, and I think that's incredibly problematic. And I wonder whether Andrew or Bill could speak to that, because if I learn something and let's say this is a valid point that was raised, we need to address these risks in deciding what we move forward on, let's say what was presented, in the opinions regarding repurposing or closure, which is out there. It's already a public issue. I think we need to be able to be free to speak about that. So if the proposal is we go to executive session, have some candid discussion with the board and district attorney for our district, and then we are free or clear about what we're free to speak about when we come out, then I have less reservation going in. But I don't want to be encumbered, because I think that would be a problem in terms of how we explain ourselves. I think we need to be able to justify our votes and have real robust discussion in public forum.
I don't know. No. Oh, Steve.
I think that was also one of Bill Mube's points, was that we should discuss and be free to discuss what we think we want to reveal or talk about further after we hear his opinion outside of the session. I don't know if it makes some sense to find that in the motion now. Uh-huh. The other sort of fine point I wanted to raise was that I, like many others, am totally open to having folks vote about their future without much restriction. There's a little bit of a fine line between whether each town gets to vote specifically about their particular school, or whether everybody gets the chance to vote as a district about whatever the plan is. There's some nuance there that I think it would be helpful to understand, and those two voting paths have different consequences.
Hey, Dave?
I move we table this discussion until and unless we have a plan on the table for which we need legal advice.
We currently have that motion and a second on the table. So, Patrick.
I think another piece of the information here is the board has directed me to get answers to the board's legal authority in decision making around this topic as they're considering what actions to take in the future or not take. This is an effort on my part to respond to the directive given to me by the board to bring that information for the board's consideration. So I think that's an important part of the deliberation here about whether or not to hear that advice that the board has requested.
And Steve, is your hand up again, or is it still from before? Okay, Steve.
Basically just ditto. I was going to say the same thing as Patrick just said.
Okay. So, Sandy?
Again, I don't know if Mr. Mube or Snow could speak. What I'd like to say is I know that we received information that we're going to be discussing in executive session. And I think the question presented is one that should be included in the motion so that it's clear that that is the issue that we are addressing. If this were a human resource issue and a personnel issue, we would state it. And we would be clear about that when we go in. If we had a disciplinary issue, we wouldn't be specific about names, of course, because that's why they're confidential. We would specify that that's what it is. Clearly we are addressing the concerns that towns have put forth about whether we have the authority as a board to move forward with the proposals that have been put forth. And to the extent that there may be some legal information that Mr. Mube could give us, I think we do need to have a discussion. And then, again, I don't have an objection necessarily to executive session, but I have an objection to going forward without more specificity here as to whether we can speak about what was during executive session. And I just don't know procedurally, Don, it's been a while, but if we're bound not to speak to it when we come out, how can we make a motion then? So maybe you could help me with procedure here, and then I can help to decide which way I'll go in terms of going into executive session in the first place.
I think I'm going to defer to Mr. Mube and see if he can shed a little light.
All right, let me try to shed some light on this. In order to talk about some specificity, may I call you Sandra?
Please, or Sandy. You can call me Sandy.
Sandy? It seems to be the issue of a particular question that you've seen a memo on, but it's also dealing with the articles. It's dealing with the warning. It's dealing with trying to explain your existence in terms of what you can and can't do and what powers you have and what powers you don't have, including such things. A school board is supposed to run the schools. They're not allowed to sort of delegate their responsibility to somebody else. That's what you got elected to do. So understanding some of that and carrying on that conversation is part of what I would expect to address, so you understand your roles and responsibilities in this unified school district, and then answer some particular questions that deal with your articles, deals with the warning, deals with how things are established and what options you may have or what you want to do. I'm a big believer in transparency. I think I tried to show that at the public meeting in January. To answer those, normally executive session is considered closed. What happens in executive session stays in executive session. But again, I am employed by the school district, and a vote that we would like to discuss this in open session after you hear what it is just as if you say when somebody is given legal advice, if they want to share that legal advice, there's no longer any confidentiality that is equated with that, and it's been released. So the fact that people have talked about bringing lawsuits or trying to get determinations, there's already been a lawsuit that has addressed some of the questions that are involved in this that people should know about in terms of making decisions, and then how you argue it and what you need to do to carry on your conversations. I think that's something that you should all as a group feel comfortable, and majority vote controls. So I sort of think that you're afraid to get information in a way in which an attorney typically provides confidential information that may end up in a lawsuit. And if everybody knows all of the arguments that might be presented, and here's what it is, it's changing some of the rules of what things are. If that's what you want to do, it's your choice. But as an attorney who is being asked for confidential information, I need to be able to give that confidential information so that people know what they're waiving, instead of people choosing to waive that before they even know what their choices are. So that's part of why I said I wanted to be able to give it an executive session. Then what you do with it, your information to share or not share as you decide you want to do.
So I think we're speaking this. I think that answered. Thank you. That answered some of my questions. It still highlights my concerns. I do understand we act as a board, so we need to decide whether to go in and what we do when we come out. I would just like to express that based on preparation for executive session and what we've been presented so far, that there's nothing that we couldn't ask in the public forum that I think is that we shouldn't be able not to share, and that needs to be discussed in detail in justifying any actions we ultimately take as a board. So I feel as if, unless I'm wrong and I'm not as prepared as I should be based on what we were given for executive session, nothing that I've seen tells me that it needs to be done in executive session. I mean, if we want to just be able to have an open discussion, I would move to amend to go into executive session with the understanding that we would agree that when we come back, we can speak freely about it on the way, in terms of what we raised during the session, because nothing in that executive session is required to remain confidential. And I think as a board, we need to be transparent to the public about what we're going to talk about regarding, what the authority of the board is. I think the public should know what our authority is and what the opinions are one way or the other.
Steve?
I'm curious if if we could accomplish the same thing by having a vote once we come out. If we went into executive session, heard what Bill had to say, and then when we come out, have a vote to talk about it freely. And that would release the confidentiality, and we would already know what we were releasing rather than sort of being mystified about it. I think Sandra and the others are correct that there's probably nothing we couldn't talk about in public, but we would certainly all understand that better at the end. So if it's not out of order, it would seem to make some sense to have the vote when we got out.
Patrick?
Along those lines, another option would be, if not a vote, it's fairly typical for a statement to be made coming out of executive session, and you could decide what that statement would be that would summarize whatever you felt comfortable summarizing coming out. So statement or a vote, there's room for some sort of action along those lines following executive session.
Okay. Annie?
I agree with Steve or Patrick, actually. I think either of those is a really good option. I think that we should go into executive session, find out what needs to be said, and then we can come out of it and either, have a vote about whether we're going to discuss it or make the statement.
Okay. And Steve, is your hand back up again? Yes. Okay.
Well, the only fine point is that if we vote to have a discussion, then we can discuss it in public. If we make a statement, then we've discussed it in the executive session, which I think kind of defeats the intent of what people are talking
Okay, you've all moved around. Hang on, I gotta look to find you all. All right, I'm not seeing any more board members with their, oh, Steve, you're back again. Yeah.
Well, so I'd like to make an amendment to the motion.
So I just want to be clear, this is the first motion where we have to determine that a disadvantage. And then I would think, I'm looking to Mr. Mew, that the second motion would be where we could add on and add the language to take some action when we came out of the session. But we first have to determine that we're at a disadvantage and then make the second motion.
I agree. Thanks.
Krista.
Yeah, I just, I think that the reason why I feel we would be at a disadvantage if we didn't go into executive session right now is not necessarily because of this moment in time, where, like Rob, I have a great distaste for the idea that this be adversarial. I don't want us to engage in a process that ends up in a legal action around articles. I really hope and plan to work really hard to come to solutions that we can form together. But, I imagine, what if 3, 4, 5 years from now, we haven't come to a solution that we think all of our towns would support, and we see that there is significant detriment to our students. We as a board have a responsibility to ensure that doesn't happen. And so I think we as a board have a responsibility to hear our options to protect us as a district should we get to that place. And if we got to that place where we felt we had to make a decision, and we anticipated there being legal action, I think it is a disadvantage for us to hear the arguments in public for our support of that, because it would be providing an advantage to folks that might see the other side and want to argue against that. So I don't love the idea. I want to have these conversations out in public, but I just think that it's important for us to have the space to contemplate all of the scenarios, and consider those in a way that doesn't add the potential for harm to our district in the future. I think that is a part of our responsibility. So that's all.
And then Kristen Blanchett, I saw your hand up.
Just one thing I've noticed is that, and just adding to Krista's point, perhaps, is that when we discuss things out in the open here, sometimes people hear something that someone says or something that's expressed, and A, think that that's what we're doing. There's misinformation. B, think that someone ascribes to a certain point, when actually they're just asking questions, maybe to even expound on something that they don't agree with or to understand something better. And that if we were in executive session, maybe we could, none of those things would be misconstrued, first of all, or, headlines then in Front Porch Forum where we were just discussing something. It's not that we're going to do it. Sometimes I guess that has been happening. And so, sorry, my cat decided to join. So if we can go in executive session and come out and share actual things that we think about it, and then aren't, can I use the word pilloried for just having a discussion, which isn't even anything we're ever going to do, but we're just trying to understand things better. I guess that's where I'm coming from, is that I feel like sometimes people come away from our discussions thinking that it's something that's solid and that's happening, and it's not. And it's just us having a discussion. So I don't know if that adds to this at all, but that's a problem we've been having, Sandy, I think. And that, so anyway, I think that that's been happening.
Okay. And then Sandy.
Just so I understand the disadvantage, it sounds like the disadvantage is that we may be revealing or discussing potential weaknesses to possible proposals in our authority. And by revealing them, they might be used against us should there be litigation. Is that a fair representation, Bill or Andrew? So, I mean, that's really what we're looking at. The risk is that, just to be honest, is that we may be voting as a board, be making decisions, and we don't want the other side to know. And the other side right now is the public on a proposal that we don't even know we're going forward on, that's why I have an issue with the disadvantage to the district at this stage. And I understand now a little better what the other members were mentioning. I do think that we need a clearer understanding from our attorney of what he believes the articles mean. I do think that is a useful conversation. I do think it can be made in public. I do understand other reasons why people might want to do that in executive session. Either way, I'm hoping we can have a pretty open discussion in the public from the beginning or even after executive session. That's just, I think it can be done either way. My concern is just that I don't have control of that issue on the way out. So hence I'm putting my push on the way in.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, so voting on the item about hearing this information about the disadvantage that this puts us at if we hear this in public session. That's what we need to determine right now and vote on. I'm going to go through the roll call because everybody has moved around and I can't see everybody. So in favor of, or in favor, opposed, or abstaining, let me know. And I'll go through the list. Krista.
In favor.
And Sandy?
Opposed.
Okay. Kristen Blanchett?
In favor.
Okay. Rob?
Oppose.
Okay. Dave Sharp?
Opposed.
Okay. Kevin?
In favor.
Steve Rooney?
In favor.
Caleb?
Opposed.
Okay. Andrew?
In favor.
Liz?
In favor.
Okay. Sarah LaPearl?
In favor.
Okay. Annie Denny?
In favor.
Okay. We have 8 in favor and 4 opposed. So we have determined premature knowledge. Now the next motion we need is to go into executive session and invite Patrick, Mr. Mube, Mr. Snow, and any other pieces you want to add to that motion.
I'd like to make the motion and amend it to say that we'll be free to talk about what we find after we leave executive session.
I second that motion.
So that's Steve. And was it Sandy?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, any other discussion? Okay. All right, I'll go through the roll call again. This is the motion that given the information or the determination of the district would be at a disadvantage, and the move to go into executive session, invite Mr. Mube, Mr. Snow, Patrick, and the amendment or the addition of that we be free to talk about it in public session after we leave executive session. Well, let's start with Krista.
Approve.
Okay. Sandy?
Yes.
Kristen,
Yes.
Rob,
Yes.
Dave Sharp,
Did you hear me? Yes.
oh, okay. No, I didn't. Kevin,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
okay. Caleb,
No.
okay. Andrew,
Yes.
okay. Liz,
Yes.
Sarah LaPearl,
Yes.
and Annie.
Yes.
11 in favor and 1 opposed. So the motion carries. And the time for it will go in is 6:47. Patrick will create a breakout room. Okay, so we will return to this meeting after we finish our executive session. So we'll be back.
Do I get invited to a breakout room?
Yeah, yes, Patrick will invite you, and then you'll accept that, and you'll leave this one and go to the other one.
Through Zoom, I'm sorry, or through email? Sorry, I'm not familiar with this.
So I think it comes right to your screen, right in front of you. It's been a while since we've done it, but it'll come right to you. Right, you'll get a little box that pops up.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to make sure.
Now you're all moved around. I don't know where to find you. 2, 3, 4. I think everybody's back. All right. Everyone back? Okay, thank you. Okay. Is there someone who's prepared something to say or just a comment? Dave?
So thank you. The comment I'd make coming out of executive session is that we learned that there are several ways to look at the articles and the statutes. It makes me more personally desirous of coming to a collaborative solution that that is in the best interest of our children, and realizing that any decision we make may end up in litigation.
Anyone else? Okay, sorry, everybody's moved around. I got to find you all over again. All right. Guess we'll move along with the agenda. The next item is a update the merger study. So Patrick.
Yeah, I can certainly kick off the conversation. Kevin, Don, and Krista and I joined our sort of counterparts in the Addison Northwest School District for a conversation to sort of talk about what the process would be to get a merger study committee launched. I think the MAUSD board has done their part to take action to announce that they're interested in forming a merger study committee. And I think one of the next steps was for the Addison Northwest School Board to consider a similar action. And upon taking that action, we would then be able to take next steps to form the study committee. To date, the Addison Northwest Board, I don't believe, has taken that action. So I think that's kind of the next step that we're waiting on. I can elaborate, but I think that's the gist of it. Certainly, Kevin, Krista, Don, chime in.
I'm raising my hand. I don't know if you can see me.
Oh, there you are. Okay, Krista.
I was just add that what I think I understood as the timeline was that they were going to do their reorg like we did tonight. They were going to have their conversations, and if their board was amenable to pursuing a study committee, then would try to set an agenda to have a meeting of our two boards and discuss what forming a committee would entail.
I heard about a quarter of that.
Yeah, Krista, you broke up. So
I can try to summarize it, what I think she said, which was presuming that Addison Northwest Board takes that action, that a step that would follow that would be to get both their full board and our full board together to have some conversations about charge and start to iron out some of the details that would be needed to get ironed out to launch that study committee.
And the other piece was that the smaller groups that we may meet again to sort of maybe work on preparing some ideas for an agenda. And so that would likely need an additional meeting in April. Just that's your warning. Sandy?
Okay, Don, sorry, I can't seem to raise a hand. I apologize in the Zoom meeting. Obviously, I must be behind a little because this is my first board meeting, but is the merger study being done because it's a step that's needed if the proposal that was proposed by Patrick could move forward, like specifically phase 2? Am I making the right connection here?
Our board decided that it we wanted to form a merger study committee because to gather some more information as we consider. It's not because, we're saying that's definitely going to happen. Our thoughts were, let's get some more information about this. Are they interested in, would it be just them? Would it be in countywide? It was as a way to get some answers to all those kinds of questions because we haven't had any conversations with each other.
Right, if there's even interest or feasibility and just all those issues. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that, Don. I'm behind.
Rob?
If I could just add, it is in the spirit of phase 2, but we also need to remember that phase 2 and phase 1 of Patrick's proposal are independent of each other.
Okay. Rob?
Yeah, Don, you just sort of alluded to it, but I remember in Kristen's original motion was other interested parties also. And I'm just curious if anyone has reached out to Addison Central. I mean, all 3 school districts are facing the exact same problems. And when you look out 10 years from both NESDEC studies, even a combined Northeast and Northwest, it's not a very large school district. And I was just curious if we've done that.
Yes, we have reached out. At this point in time, even though they think there may be some value in that, just given where they are in their process that they've been in for 3 years, maybe more, that wasn't necessarily something they wanted to introduce into their process at this point in the game. So not taking it off the table forever, but not at this time.
Kristen, sorry.
That's okay. At least there's no Christine on the board. That happens too. So just a reminder, and for you, Sandy, that we're in the information gathering phase, and I think that's a great thing. That kind of a committee is going to take more than now till August. Obviously, who knows how long those take? I mean, they're very complicated. Patrick, you had said at least a year, right, for that sort of a process. So
yeah, I think the earliest we were targeting was FY24 for anything like that to happen.
So again, this doesn't mean we're doing that. I'm just saying that to the public. It means we're studying everything we can to help the kids have the best education possible. So some people had voted against having the study committee on this board because they felt it was premature because we haven't gotten to phase 1 or phase 2. But again, it's just information gathering. Doesn't mean we've taken a position. It means we want to see what kind of information we can get to help with the best education of the children and the teenagers in our district.
Steve?
Well, and the other thing too is, in terms of the premature question, is that phase 2 could be part, or merger, doesn't have to be phase 2. Time we get this done, it might be phase 1, but a merger could be part of a different package. It could be part of a whole different scheme, but it could be playing a part in that setup too. So having more information about it is helpful.
I think one other important clarification might be, and this just sort of occurred to me in the meeting that we had with our partners over at Addis Northwest. I proposed a pretty specific approach to a merger that merge high schools, et cetera. That's not a foregone conclusion, right? There are ways to merge districts that don't merge middle and high schools as well. So I just want to clarify that it's not necessarily a package deal or doesn't have to materialize exactly as how I recommended it, just in case that's a new way of thinking about it for folks.
Okay. All right. How about an update on the DMG?
Yeah, so I just met with Nate Levinson this afternoon, actually, and kind of brought him up to speed about some of the conversations that have been happening at the board level around wanting to consider vetting additional proposals that come in the same sort of manner, so that all proposals, my recommendation, et cetera, all get sort of the same level of assessment and analysis. So he's going to redraft. He had a draft proposal. He's going to redraft a proposal to include that option. And what he was speaking to, I think, resonated with me in terms of what I think the board was looking for. And his idea was, to vet my recommendation, to bring 1 or 2 ideas that DMG has based on their experience in doing this around the country. Nate, in particular, has expertise and experience in working with districts who are struggling with declining enrollment, and vetting however many community options that might come forth that the board wants vetted, and to look at all of those and come up with a system to vet those on a same sort of basis of comparison, and open to contributing in any way that makes sense to a process to engage the community, to hear community thoughts about those. So I think he was kind of right on the right track with what I think the board has expressed an interest in receiving for support from DMG. So he's going to work those numbers up, get them back to me in a week or so. And then I hope to have something ready for you to share, possibly at our meeting next week, but perhaps the meeting after that.
Sandy? Yep.
Yes. Thank you, Patrick. So DMG is the consultant, right? I just want to be clear. I appreciate Correct. That. You touched on something I thought quite a lot about since deciding to try to be on the board, was how to, in a more objective, sort of neutral manner, assess everyone's possible proposals so that they don't come from one side or another, right? That these are all ideas and how can we assess them equitably, right? And during a community gathering, a select board meeting, a really good thought came up about how our district did conflict issue bargaining. If I remember, that's the name for it when we did school teacher negotiations.
Critical issues bargaining.
Critical issues. Thank you. Much different word. So critical issues bargaining. I was not on the bargaining team, so I didn't get the benefit of that process, but I understood it, and the results were amazing. That overall, people found the process to be incredibly valuable. and productive. You had such differing views with regard to teacher negotiations, and through very skilled mediation, were able to come to some kind of consensus, even if it was from a bunch of different sides, right? And I wonder, and just put out there as you're thinking, and we have discussions with DMG, can a process that was able to do like that with that type of bargaining, is that something that can also be utilized in how we look at proposals? By bringing all the stakeholders, like really, I don't want just this view and this view and this town did this one and this did that one. I want to look at all the parts of everything, of all the proposals, and maybe come to some kind of consensus where then we can evaluate the pieces and parts and somehow create some idea of creating apples to apples instead of, some kind of level way of evaluating these things as a board. So I just put that out there because I thought it was a wonderful suggestion. And I know there are people on the board who know this process very well because they went through it. And so I'm hoping in the future to have a discussion to see if there's something useful in that process that we might be able to bring to this process. Thanks, Patrick.
Krista?
Yeah, to just follow up on that, Sandy, I think that process is really valuable as well. And it may be when we get to our next, or not our next agenda item, but the one around proposal requests, that we can talk about where to build that in. Because I think what one of the things I had the chance to be a part of that in negotiations, and one of the things I think was most valuable was the collective grappling with the issues that we did across the parties. So it was staff and board members working together with a key set of issues on a problem. And so I think I'm really interested in hearing, what the DMV might recommend, but I'm more interested in hearing a rubric that we could all apply and work together to evaluate options. And when I say all, I mean board members, community members, staff, students. And so to me, that seems like that would be the most valuable process with the most integrity, transparency, and opportunity to build in trust. So thanks for bringing that up. And perhaps it's something we can talk about when we get to that point in the agenda.
Okay. All right, I'm going to keep moving along. Transportation study update.
Yeah, so we just signed an agreement with the transportation study. Gosh, I'm forgetting the name of the vendor that we're going with. It's the same vendor that Addison Central used. And they're going to be studying phase 1, which is pretty MAUSD specific, and looking at routes and generating the information needed to answer some of the questions that the board raised back in mid-December, I guess it was, or late December. And additionally, they're going to be gathering information on phase 2 of my recommendation to inform the board of what that would look like. And part of phase 2 obviously brings in some Addison Northwest components. So we've been working with Addison Northwest around looking kind of holistically across the 2 districts at phase 2 and the study that's happening there. They're interested as well in understanding what information may come from that. So we're going to be sharing the cost of the phase 2 study. And by using the same consultant that Addison Central has been using in their process, one consultant has information about all 3 school districts that we could look to inform future bus contracts, and we could take advantage of that information in different ways going forward, with or without repurposing and school consolidation and all of that. So excited about how that will position us, and excited to get information from them that will help inform the board going forward.
Sandy, is your hand up from before, or is that new? Oh, okay. All right, let me look. All right. Okay, let's keep moving along then. The next item is an action item to approve the proposal request process. So there were several documents included in the agenda. the call for proposals was sort of the announcement piece, and then the values worksheet, the proposal assessment tool, and the proposal timelines were more possible tools for the board to use. I think we can still make adjustments to all of them and change the information. The attempt with the call for proposals was to put that in a more friendlier version so that people felt welcomed to present an idea and less, intimidated by it being a traditional RFP or what a request. That way, it was a way to open it up and make it more inviting. So it's an action item, so we need a motion and a second, and then we can talk about it.
I'll make a motion. Steve.
Yep.
I'll second, Kevin.
Okay. All right. And what do you want to talk about? Kevin.
I think generally it's great. It's got we need to get off the dime on this thing, and the call for proposals is very clear, graphically pleasing, if you will, so it's easy to read. I do continue to struggle with the timeline a little bit. I think, from my point of view, we're front-ending the proposal process with more time than it may need, and we're short-cycling the presentation process. And I have a couple concerns. Is I don't think there's enough time for people once a proposal is given the green light to prepare for a presentation. And I think we may be also sending a message where, given the amount of time for proposals and such a short time for presentations, we may be sending a message that one doesn't need as much attention as the other. And to me, once we hear presentations, I would really like to think, or I'm expecting them to be fairly detailed, as opposed to a rather top level description as far as proposals are concerned.
I can speak to timeline a little bit too, related to my conversation with DMG today with Nate. So as I was sharing with Nate the interest the board had, and Nate was kind of speaking back to some ideas he had that seemed to fit well as I described, he said, now that changes the timeline a bit. That's going to take time to do the vetting, to create the metric that we can apply across all the proposals that are getting vetted, to then engage community and receive feedback and do the analysis leading up to decisions. So I think maybe that's a bigger picture timeline conversation, but I think it fits with what you're talking about, Kevin, that once we hear more from DMG about their proposal, we may need to come back to the drawing board a bit on the timeline that we've been working from. And either that means we want to stick to the timeline and we don't go forward with DMG as we've kind of laid out, or we want to go forward as it's laid out and we adjust the timeline. I think that's a conversation the board will need to have as we understand more.
Sandy.
Thanks, Don. I'm putting out there, is this, I looked at the timeline and the call for proposals, but in terms of what I had just spoken to earlier about critical issues bargaining, and I don't mind getting DMG's input on how that kind of structure can be used. Will that, if we were to decide as a board that seemed like a collaborative and collective way to bring the community into this process, how would that be incorporated into this timeline? So I put that out there because, and I'm really leaning on the other board members who are familiar with that process and the experiences that they had during negotiating. And I believe, Patrick, you were there, right? You were there during all of this as well. I mean, it was really, I wasn't there, but the results were remarkable. I'm just going to say, two sides that I thought would never, ever be able to reach some kind of consensus and go forward in a way that they did, I found incredible. And I think people felt valued. They felt that their ideas were considered. I think they better understood why certain things may not be considered and decided not to be, but at least they were part of that process. So I wonder how that plays into this timeline and the current structure. I just think it would be such a value to not model after something that was so successful would be such a waste, given that I think our district did amazing work.
Thank you. Rob, and then Krista.
Yeah, I'll echo what Sandy and Krista said earlier, and also what Kevin said. I hope there's some more there's more flexibility in the, I guess, proposed timeline. I didn't know if we were going to be voting on that this timeline be the timeline tonight, because you read the request for a proposal, and then this timeline to me just sort of seems like it's almost like a competition. And in my opinion, like that's how I read it personally, and I don't know how other folks read it, but it just seems like, all right, you go off, do your thing, you go off, do your thing, and then, where it's going to be a big reveal, the mask is going to come off, or the singer, or whatever. And I just hope as we move forward over these months that it's not a competition, that it's a collaboration. And, if it's a single idea from a student, ideas brought forth from our building principals, looking at Patrick and Patrick coming back with a new idea regarding his proposal, that we have the ability to chew on all of that as a board, and not just sort of pick a winner, if you will, from a group. And so I really appreciate the request for proposal, but it doesn't seem to jive with the way this timeline sort of lays out the different steps during the different weeks. So that's just where I'm at the moment.
Krista, and then Kristen.
So I'm wondering if, it seems like the most pressing thing is to let folks know we're accepting proposals, right? So if we can just get that out there, recognizing that we're trying to give folks enough information to present something robust, but that, we're still trying to define what that is. And then it sounds like we might have some, what the board needs to do is determine what our rubric is for evaluating those, and that DMG might provide some help with that, if not next week or the week after. And so I also did a little bit of looking at the timeline and was kind of, adjusting it a little bit and imagining, what if by April 6th meeting, we've determined what those metrics are by which we'll evaluate all proposals in whatever form they take. And then also at the same time, determine what the evaluation process will be. Would it be a group of folks, not just board members? Would it be a collective critical issues bargaining model? What would that look like? But we don't necessarily need to, I don't think, decide that tonight. We can maybe hear what DMG recommends and determine that in April. Then we would have submissions presented to the board in May, and spend May and June in those groups with those metrics, evaluating those proposals, going out to the community, get additional feedback, taking the time we need to do all of that work. So I think we have a little bit of time on fleshing out some of those other details, as long as folks in the community are, accept that it's not a, completely baked RFP. It's just, we want folks to know that we want to hear from them and to start working on what you might want to offer us.
And along those lines, for what it's worth, when I was talking with Nate, he was just sort of initially sketching it out, which we'll see more detail about when he submits his sort of proposal. He was looking more toward realistically a fall community engagement around the various options that would have been vetted and that we're seeking community engagement and feedback on. So it could be a pretty significant adjustment to the timeline based on that just really preliminary conversation that I had with Nate.
Kristen. You're still muted, Kristen.
Thank you. So having been involved with the negotiating, I just wanted to put out the main points of that so that everyone knows those. And it's brief because it's a very simple process, even though it's very rich. So the first is each group identifies their own problems, and then the parties identify shared interests. Information is transparent and shared from all parties. All information is shared and transparent. Trust is built. You have to leave your reptilian brain at the door. In fact, we always had an alligator in the middle of the table. And if someone was doing that, usually someone on their own side would throw it out in the middle. And that knowing that no one would be completely happy with the outcome. Or, that's just the nature of negotiating. And no one will get their own way 100%. So I'd say those are the basic pieces of that. I don't know how they could be applied to the situation exactly, but yes, it did work incredibly well. And there's an article from the Addison Independent from the first round that we did that I think might be a good thing for everyone to see. Maybe I can find that and we can get it to everyone, but it kind of talked about the process, and those of us involved in it on the teacher side and the board side had some comments there. So I'll try to find that and maybe we could share, everyone could read that. Thanks.
Sandy and then Kevin.
Thanks, guys. The one question I had is that I understood some of the amazing effectiveness came from the skill of the actual mediator. I think that was used. Sounded like she was particularly skilled at, really adapting sort of this model, well, it was in this case to the negotiating. And I didn't know, Patrick or board, if there's any way we can reach out to see someone who may be skilled in that area, or if she's available to see if they think that that's a model that could be useful and adapted to our current issues.
Yeah, we could certainly reach out. Annie Rutsky is the mediator that we've been using that's with FMCS, the Federal Mediation Conciliatory Services or something like that. Mm-hmm. And it's free, at least their support has been free in the past. So that's a good thing. I think and we can explore that. And I'm happy to do that. And I think the board has a lot of thinking to do about, we have to pick a direction or a combination of the directions. Like we have to have a plan. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that we have clarity on the plan, but maybe this is to help inform the plan is how I'm taking what you're thinking.
Yes, just because it's not teacher negotiation. We have sort of a different sort of format and how it might lend assistance, if it can, to this process. Because I think that what Kristen mentioned about the transparency and building trust, I think that's incredibly valuable. So if there's any way that we can learn from that and maybe somehow incorporate it in our process, I think would be great.
I just want to add, it's Katrina, our first connection with the mediation service was through Relationships by Objective. So they actually helped us have a labor management come together, if you will, over Thanksgiving almost, right? Those of us who remember being there, and actually continued on with a relationship with us for maybe about 16 months. And then we leaned into then only using them for this negotiation process. And by only, I don't mean to diminish its impact at all, but it is what that relationship morphed into. So it goes even deeper and further back than negotiations. And I think it's a great idea to explore.
Thanks, Katrina.
Kevin.
I'm thinking about time, and I'm hearing from Patrick that maybe the end date of an August retreat would be delayed a little bit, maybe as far as the decision-making point. But I'm really concerned about the amount of time we have between now and August, particularly since we don't have any meetings planned for July. According to my math, that's like 3 months to get all this done. And we can't keep pushing things off. We need to really get things rolled up and going. And as far as, the process, again, my concept has always been that the proposal process is fairly high level. And then and I know it's a sensitive word, but as we down select or consolidate or group those proposals for refinement, then that is the point where we have the opportunity to have a lot of engagement with a lot of detail. And the quicker we get to that point, the better off we'll be. And if the timeline is going to go past August, I think that's pretty important, because not that we necessarily have a whole lot more time to play with, but we're on a really tight schedule right now.
Sandy, is your hand back up again, or is it okay? That's from before. I think, as Krista said earlier, I think we probably, what the thing that's the most pressing right at this moment is to get that call for proposals out, and maybe we consider the timeline to be preliminary and the tools to further be determined as we get more information, kind of thing. But to get the word out to people about the proposals and get that process started, and then we have a meeting next week. We can carve out a little more time to look at another piece of it, or to see if we have any more information. But I think if we keep adapting as we get more information, we could get on the way. Krista, do you have something to add?
Yeah, and just the only thing we didn't talk about, Dawn, was the idea of a workshop or information session where we could share some key info for folks to help them build their proposals. So Patrick, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that, because that was something you had suggested, but that's the only other thing we'd probably want to let folks know about sooner rather than later.
Right. And that's in the call for proposals on the back, on the second page. It talks about workshop dates and workshops and dates. But Patrick, if you want to.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk more about that. So my thinking continues to evolve. I think, yeah, bringing together people who are interested in submitting a proposal to just hear who has what ideas, like where are they in the process? I think as a support to one another, right? If there are 4 different individuals working to basically put together a similar proposal, them going out on their own doing that work in parallel may not be the best way to approach it. They could support one another and work together in creating a proposal. I also think it's an opportunity to share some information. Having been through this process, it's such an iterative process, and there's a lot of layers to work through as you put together a proposal that is in depth enough to for people to really assess and see if it has some legs to help resolve our situation. So I feel like that as a launch, I don't think that is likely to be a be-all, end-all in terms of supporting people with information as they're trying to put these proposals together. So to think that through, I get a little bit concerned about capacity to do all the day-to-day stuff that needs to happen in our organization and support an unknown number of people who are going to be putting together an unknown number of presentations and recommendations. I'm concerned about that, but I think it's really important that we support those who are interested in putting together proposals in any way that we can. And it's nuanced enough that different groups may be looking for different kinds of information or different layers. And I want us to be able to be responsive to that. So the workshop is really a starting point to get people together, create some foundational information, and then hopefully form some sort of relationship that we can support that work going forward over the coming months, which will look different perhaps to each group that's putting together their recommendations.
Steve, Rooney?
So I made the motion, and I think the 5/4 deadline right now to submit, I think it's realistic. I think we should try to get all what we're going to see in front of us by that time point. If we have to adjust the process after that, at least we're not disadvantaging people who wanted to make the proposal. You know, if we stray off this timeline after 5/4, it's really just how are we evaluating it, and how are we going to engage the community after we come to after we filter stuff down, or whether we start another CIB process and insert it. The important thing is not to advertise for submittals and then change that date unnecessarily. I mean, RFPs get pushed off all the time. You get people have an addenda goes out and the timeline gets delayed or whatever. But I think we could at least agree that we're going to get to 5/4 right now as our action item, and then see what we have in our lap when we get to 5/4. That's another thing as well, is just how many of these things are we really going to look at? It may be we only have 3, that really are worth considering. And maybe there's a 4th when you combine everybody else's ideas together. But I think the important thing is to at least have a deadline for the RFP.
Kevin?
Well, I was kind of actually thinking about 4/6 for the proposal deadline, and that's not a lot of time. That's a month, but that gives us some time for on the back side for the presentations, for the people that will be presenting to be able to prepare.
Krista?
Yeah, I just don't know if Patrick is envisioning some members of his team offering a informational workshop to help people prepare. I'm not sure that's enough time.
Man, I wish you all could be on the same page.
I just go back to my concern about the timeline. If we keep pushing stuff out, and maybe the August retreat date's not realistic or something, but I'm just really concerned about the amount of meetings we have and the amount of work that needs to get done, and making sure that we're spacing out our timeline the right way.
Well, if we stick to 5/4 and we don't push that off, we're going to have a month and a couple of weeks to 6/22, I think, to organize ourselves on, post submittal.
Right.
One thing we could decide to do, I'm sure everybody would jump for joy, is to schedule a July meeting. It would really get everybody excited, I'm sure. But we could at least at the end of 5/4 understand whether we even had to consider that.
I'd like to call the question.
What's up?
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. I just wanted to know, well, actually, I'm kind of in the same vein with Kevin here. I was trying to figure out, are we doing each of those sections separately? So, for example, are we moving on call for proposal going out and then voting on, the other parts? Because they all, and then the timeline separately, which we've been addressing, is problematic, like agreeing to a timeline that right now already seems like we're going to have to change it other than the proposal date itself, like the May date that's there. So I wanted clarification, Don, because I wasn't
I think we could vote on it as is. My point was that as long as we're not moving 5-4, if we have to adjust something else down the road, then it's not really going to disadvantage folks, as long as we don't play with the 5-4 date.
Right. I would agree. As long as we get the word out that we're getting proposals and we need them back by this day, the rest we can adjust as we get more information, I think.
Okay, that helps.
Okay. And now Kevin wants to call the question. All right. So the motion is to approve the proposal request process. All right. Let me get my roll call because now you're all over the place again. So Krista, I don't know where you are anymore.
I'm here. I approve.
Okay. Okay. And Sandy?
I'm going to abstain just because I haven't looked as much into it, just if it's okay.
Okay. Kristen Blanchett? Kristen? Okay. Rob?
And this is with the 5-4 day, not 4-6?
Yes, it's written as 5-4 in this.
Yeah, as long as we're able to keep flexible pants on.
Yep. It sounds like we're going to have to. Dave Sharp?
Yes.
Okay. Kevin?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Okay. Caleb?
Yes.
Okay. Andrew?
Yes.
Liz?
Yes.
Okay. Sarah?
Yes.
Okay. Annie?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know where some of you are. I can just hear you. All right. So one abstention, and let me just check one more time. Kristen Blanchett, are you back? Nope. So 10 in favor and 1 abstention. So the motion passes. All right. The next item is a discussion item around questions for the superintendent. This has been an attempt to get at these for the last couple of meetings, and we haven't. So the first thing I wanted to do is members have been individually sending questions, and so I wanted to quickly read through the list of questions so that everybody knows what others have been asking, and then we can go through and decide which questions are the ones as a board we want to get the answers to. So I'll just read through them as quickly as possible. I am interested in the per pupil cost per town with SPED, special education, and construction bond costs removed. Has there been any communication with Virgin's leadership regarding the reuse of high schools in the 2 communities? I have suggested 7 to 9 in one building and 10 to 12 in another. Do you have any interest in pursuing that idea before voted merger? What year was the last bond voted? What was the bond amount? What was the bond going to be used for? How many votes was it rejected by? When did Addison Northwest School District pass their current bond? What was the bond amount? What was the bond going to be used for? How many votes was it passed by? Can you provide more detail regarding placement of students in the 2 K-5 scenarios? Will kids from the same town go to different schools? Will kids in the same family go to different schools? How will this be determined? It appears to me that these is no comparison of cost and savings of keeping grade 6 in the elementary school and moving them to the middle school. Was this decision made without any financial consideration? Could the MTSS operate differently in the different town elementary schools? Could the building principals and staff work to find more efficiencies while still supporting all of the learners' needs? Could MTSS look different at LCS than Bristol? Can we find more savings and better outcomes? Is the MTS model as is one we can ultimately afford? What does the model at Addison Northwest School District look like? Is it compatible with ours? What are the costs of the coordinators and coaches, as well as any other administrative costs that are spread across the MAUSD tax base according to your per pupil analysis? And how many coordinators and coaches have been hired since 2016? I was trying to create these ratios myself, utilizing the document that Katrina put together and the spreadsheets. However, I best ask the experts, as I'm sure to make mistakes. Could you provide the following ratios for FY23 and FY26? I'm wondering if these will change, knowing that we will see a decrease in students and staff over that time. Students to FTE, classroom teacher ratio. Students FTE to support staff. Students combined FTE. Is it possible to better present the components itemized of the per pupil spending analysis for each of the towns? For example, if Lincoln students cost $28K per pupil and Bristol is at $16K, what did the cost look like in 2018 or 2019? What are the necessary components that were included in the analysis to arrive at this number? The same for Bristol, etc. What about the cost of the LCS bond? If the Mount Abe construction debt is spread across the 5 towns, so too should the debt associated with LCS. The debt associated with LCS should not be tethered to LCS because in 2016, the SU absorbed it. Is that the correct line of thinking? Is the financial model being used to make calculations for different scenarios working outward to FY26? Many folks have asked me and I don't know how to respond. Would we ever move to a model that allowed a town to keep the school open in the district and pay as an individual town for the differences in spending per pupil versus other elementary schools in the district? I.e. costs $16K per student, Bristol student, Lincoln is at $24K per student. Could the town of Lincoln or community members subsidize the extra $12K per student via a third party? Thus, at the district level, there is equal spending across the board and the extra is picked up somewhere else. What is the breakdown per town in regards to overall students in the K-12 system in MAUSD for FY23? What does the breakdown look like in FY26? What efficiencies and cost savings are realized by moving the 6th grade to middle school and the recertifications needed? What research shows us that this business model, economy of scale, works in education? I would like to understand all the numbers used to arrive at the school's per pupil cost. I have understood that the free and reduced lunch price in the district is running around 40%. I would like a breakdown of this by town. Also, the weighting report shows that 11% poverty rate in our district. I've asked our legislative delegation why the difference. Are you able to explain the disparity of these numbers? Lincoln has the most debt. According to the numbers provided to the Addison Independent, Lincoln's cost per equalized pupil is $10,000 greater than Bristol's. How can we explain this extreme discrepancy? Does it point to the seniority of staff at LCS, or is it purely a reflection of enrollment? Is there a way to reconcile the discrepancy without closing the doors to K6 full-time Lincoln residents? Can you provide a brief snapshot of the FY30 financial projections through the lens of phase 1 only, phase 1 and 2, and similar breakouts as in the proposal presentation slides 26 and 31? I guess my biggest question is if the district has a sense of what schools the 77 pandemic home study students withdrew from. So that's a long list of questions. So tonight, what we need to do is consider those and narrow down the ones that we would like answers from. So,
Don, is this listed somewhere?
I've pulled them from emails that were sent and made a list so I can share that out.
Right. I mean, I didn't see it linked in the agenda.
Right. No, this is just a list that I made, gathering everybody's questions as we're talking about this. There's, because some board members are wanting answers to the questions, but these are the scopes of questions that the administration is being hit with. And we as a board have not we gave that initial list. It's time, again, if you have additional questions, for us as a board to decide what they are and give them, because there's no way the administration can run the school district and continue to answer the onslaught of questions from individuals that are coming in. So this is really to have a discussion at the table all together and decide what questions do we need answers to. Andrew.
So I'm hearing in some of those, maybe some of those questions had already been previously answered by Patrick in presentations. I wonder if a first pass through those questions is to line out things that we've already answered. I don't know if anyone else heard questions in there that seemed somewhat familiar to previous presentations, but.
Okay, that's not, yep. All right, and then I'll go at first one. Next one is Dave.
Thank you. My biggest question is with regard to the numbers that the administration calculated for per pupil costs. Since they made the comment, I don't recall exactly where or when, that the state no longer makes these calculations as they have in the past. So these were done in-house. So I presume that the, all the numbers, the bond and the SPED and the data methodology and formulas that they used are readily available. It shouldn't be too big a task to pull this together and present it to us. That's my biggest question. I do have another question, and that has to do. I didn't take notes from what you were reading, but I didn't hear this. We didn't really get an ends report from last year for obvious reasons. COVID being the number one reason. I'm very curious about what the social emotional state is of our elementary schools, and wondered if there was some sort of interim ends report that was available, whether the administration has been monitoring this, and can tell us that for each elementary school. Thank you.
Okay. Next I have Liz.
And I just was just thinking that a lot of those questions might be redirected with the study committee with Addison North. Entirely appropriate. Somebody they could look into that.
Okay, thanks, Liz. It was hard to hear, you were breaking up, but I think I got the gist of some of the questions could already be answered, or we may get answers through the study group. Okay. Rob.
Yeah, just going through that list, it sounds like some of them might not be word for word redundant, but trying to get to the same thing. Not being able to see it, I guess. And I don't know if there's an opportunity where we sit down over the next week and look at that list, and as individual board members, just if we'd like the answer to it, if we put our name next to it, and if it's a majority of the board, would that then go through to Patrick and Floyd? And if it's not, then it's not able. I'm just curious, like that list went so quickly, like I'd have no way right now without looking at it and just sort of seeing. And I agree with Andrew. I think some of them have already been answered too.
Yep.
Just my thought.
Krista.
Yeah, I don't know if what you're about to say, Don, is that we can't do what Rob's suggesting outside of the meeting, but I am trying to think about a process that would make this a little bit easier. And I think maybe if between now and our next meeting, you could group similar questions and note ones that have been answered and, maybe link where they're answered. I'm happy to help with this if that's a big lift, because it might be. And then we can come to some consensus about what's remaining and what we still want to know. I do think it's kind of a symptom of the fact that we feel like we're looking at a proposal and we still have a lot of questions. And so clearly things need to be more fleshed out. I'm wondering tonight if at the very least we could hear more on the per pupil question, because that's one that's been out for a while, that maybe we could take a quick poll to see if folks want to hear any information that's available to be shared this evening. Because I think that's one that's, it's just been out for a while and a lot of people are interested in. But otherwise, if we can figure out a process on the other questions, I think that would be helpful.
Sandy?
I think I just would mirror what Krista said. I think that made sense.
Okay. Kevin?
I agree with the per pupil witch hunt. There's been a lot of varying opinions and assertions about how those numbers were built. I would be hesitant to go back in history. I would look at now and maybe a projection into next year, short term, that would give an adequate picture of what's going on there. But tracking back 2-3 years, which was one of the questions, I think, is not a lot of value added. But that question really needs to get put to bed.
Okay. Can I get a thumbs up from board members? Are you, if there is some information available tonight on the per pupil spending, are you interested in hearing about it? Looking to see.
Well, I'm not sure we have to hear about it tonight. I think we need resolution. I don't know if it needs to be tonight or not.
Well, let's see what Patrick is. Patrick, is there anything you can provide us with tonight?
It just so happens there's a presentation for that.
Oh, how convenient.
Want me to jump into it now?
Yes, I'd love.
Well, can I just add something first?
Sure.
So that list went by in a blur. I couldn't possibly tell you which one of those questions I'd like to have answered. I'm not really sure why it's not possible to put a list together in a doodle poll or something, or a survey monkey, and have at least an idea of how many board members want to have a question answered. You can make that public in the next meeting and answer the questions that have the most votes. I don't think we're hiding anything from anybody by doing that. And we could at least consider the questions for a minute before we try to vote on whether we want them to answer them or not.
Well, the purpose of me reading all those to you was so that you would all understand that that's just a list in the last month that the administration has gotten from individuals. And since we act as a group, we have to make and have those conversations here at the table together.
Yeah, I completely understand why you did it. I'm just saying that to ask us to try to decide which ones of those to ask Patrick to work more on, because I couldn't do it from that conversation. I mean, I'd have to see the list, and then I'd have to tell you, well, these have already been answered. I don't think that's pertinent. This one just looks like somebody's got an extra grind. And this one is, yeah, I'd be interested in knowing what the answer to that question was. But I can't do it, just a verbal run through. I don't know how I'm going to vote on it.
Okay. Sandy and then Krista.
Thank you. I get where the exercise is coming from and do appreciate the difficulty, but I think also the action that's being requested, that we as a board figure out a way of narrowing our questions so that we can actually get realistic, answers in a reasonable time. I don't think we're going to be breaching any open meetings issues if we don't have a discussion and we do what I think Steve suggested, where we get the list, we can indicate what is important. I know this is extra work, so I get it, and thank you, Chris, for offering to help compile this. And maybe we can help as well, Don, because I know it's daunting. But I guess it brings to mind then, how do we effectively as a board raise these questions without spending the next hour literally talking about each one and what's worthwhile, and is there a way that we can do this more fair and efficiently? I'm happy to look at that list and cross them out and stuff, but I see what you're saying, but I definitely can't take action. I don't feel like I could do that.
It's an action item. It's not an action.
Oh, I thought it was an action item.
No, it's a discussion.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Okay.
Well, that also changes things. I thought we were supposed to actually tell you which ones of these questions you want answered tonight.
So yeah, I see that on the agenda. It's a discussion.
And I think the concern in the process is if there's voting essentially happening outside of a warned meeting electronically, that would be a violation of open meeting law. I think perhaps a way around that would be if there is this sort of revised list that's distributed, and individuals send their feedback on that list directly back to Don and Don alone, that may be the way to work around that and be compliant with open meeting law, which is something we've done in the past.
Do you have a proposal on how better we can raise our concerns in a way that can be efficiently dealt with during board work? Because it sounds like it's a challenge. I mean, it has to be.
Yeah.
I mean, I know this is a discussion. I'm just wondering if anyone has any possible solutions.
I mean, we went through a process in December that produced a dozen questions or so, something like that,
right.
Gave me the structure I needed to know what to respond to, and it was manageable. And some questions take longer than others, so I didn't have answers to all of them at the very next meeting. And in fact, some of those questions we're still working to get answers to by engaging with consultants. But that was really helpful to know, okay, the board wants this, as opposed to the 75 individual requests that are too much to really keep up with. That was really helpful.
Okay, and Krista.
Yeah, just to try to wrap it up so we can hear from Patrick, I'm happy again to work with Don to try to figure out how to consolidate and then share back out the list. And maybe also think of a process where we can have a working list and we can revisit it, not every week maybe, but so that it's not like this is the list and this is your only time to ask questions, because that's not appropriate. We want to be able to ask questions, but we also don't want to inundate our administrators. And then I think the other message is that we all need to really agree that that's our process, and that that's the way we're going to funnel questions through as a board. So that's all I wanted to say. And if we can hear from Patrick, I'd be appreciative.
Okay, Patrick.
Ready? Okay, let me share my screen. And just a reminder to everyone that I can't see you all when I'm sharing my screen. So if your hand's up, I may miss it. So jump in if you have a question as we're kind of working through this. So there's the actual mathematics involved in this conversation, and that's important. But to me, the most important part is the context within which the mathematics occurs. And so I'm going to emphasize the context here as we work toward understanding the actual sort of calculations that happen. And so the context really is around equality and equity as I'm seeing it. And I think the numbers for sure will change, whatever the exact calculations produce. And there are several different ways you could approach this. But the story and the context is consistent regardless of how the numbers materialize. So that's sort of the vein in which I'm going to share this information. And so it seems at times we have these two kind of competing interests. One is equity in support and services to students, and another interest is equality in spending. From my perspective as superintendent, equity in support and services to student trumps equality in spending. I think it's a fact that in MAUSD, it costs more to educate a student in a micro school than it does to educate a student in a small school. I use those terms intentionally, micro versus and small versus small and large, because we don't have large elementary schools at all, anywhere at MAUSD. We have micro and we have small. And I think it's also important to recognize, and this is not a surprise to me, this is obvious to me, when we focus on providing each school with and making sure that they're equitably equipped to meet the needs of students while experiencing the inefficiencies that come with small schools, micro schools, we can expect higher cost per student in the micro schools. And if I have to choose, and as superintendent, I'm in a position to choose equitable support and services or equal spending per student, I will choose equitable support and services every single time. And I'll get into why as we get a little bit further here. If equality in spending is the goal, larger schools then are resourced at a level that enables them to provide more robust support and services to their students, while the smaller schools may not have enough resources to meet their student needs. And this equality picture, I think, represents that pretty well. This is not, as the educational leader of this organization, what I aspire for us to provide. Because I think it's also true that when equality in spending is the goal, student outcomes begin to be determined by where you live. And there's specific language in the board's ends policy that states that the board is committed to equity and outcomes for each student, so that students' achievement of the ends is not limited or predetermined by characteristics such as geography. If we make decisions that determine student outcomes based on where they live because of equalizing cost per pupil, I think we are working in direct opposition to what we're saying we want to achieve in the ends. And this language is fairly recent. This policy was adopted in 2018, along with a whole slate of policies, because that's when MAUSD adopted its whole slate of policies. But this language was added just prior to that, to the ends policy, to make a clear statement about equity for our students. And when I think about, the equality and the equity, that fence really acting as a barrier there and looking at ways to overcome that barrier, that's meaningful and that's important work. And we need to look beyond that even to removing barriers as opposed to focusing on overcoming them. And that sort of liberation scene shows what we might aspire toward. So that, I think, is the important message. That's, if there's a takeaway tonight, it's not what were the specific numbers that you crunched to produce a cost per pupil. The takeaway tonight is it does cost more for students in small schools and micro schools than in larger schools. There are efficiencies that are inevitable there. And it's important to ensure, even if it costs more per student, that we provide equitable support and services to our students so that where you live doesn't become a determining factor in your outcomes. With that in mind, here's really simply the calculation. And also I'll show some more specific numbers and slightly more updated numbers. But it's really, what are the costs that are directly associated to a school, plus that school's share of the district's costs, divided by the number of students in that school. What Dave was referring to earlier is equalized pupil. We don't get an equalized pupil count by school any longer since we merged districts. We get a single equalized pupil count as a district, which is really hard to peel apart and assign to separate schools. So what we're using now, what was used in the figures that were shared with the independent, is enrollment figures, not equalized pupil count. So we then take that combination of costs, divide it by the number of students in the school, and that gives us our cost per student for that school. So a lot of questions can surface around what are included in those costs, and I think that's where a lot of the questions have surfaced. So the costs that are directly associated with the school, those are the salaries and benefits of the individuals specific to that school. So yes, if a school has a more senior staff, their average salary and benefits package per staff member is likely higher than a school with less senior staff. But this was an attempt to, as close as we can, kind of replicate the process that we would have used when we were individual districts. When Robinson was the Starksboro Town School District, the real costs of its employees were calculated to determine what the budgetary needs were, and the cost per pupil for Robinson specifically utilized those. So we are using the salaries and benefits specific to the individuals tied to that school, along with the facilities expenses specific to the school, any debt the school may have, which at the elementary level right now is Robinson and Lincoln with a much greater debt load than Robinson, but those two have debt, and supplies, those sorts of things that are directly associated with the school. Then we add in the school's share of the district costs, which again is a practice that has been in place in the past when we were separate districts. The supervisory union budget was apportioned out to schools based on the percentage of the total district's students that a school had. So utilizing a similar approach here, those costs include transportation for the district, food service, special education, salaries and benefits of folks that work in the district positions, insurance for the district, supplies, and the district HRA expenses are included in those shares, those costs that are apportioned out. And then the number of students. Interestingly, we count students in a lot of different ways. We get some information from the Agency of Education about how many students we're credited for. We have our own calculations internally. So even the number of students we choose to divide by is subject to change. I think what went out earlier might have come from the Department of or Agency of Education. What I'm going to show you tonight utilizes a little bit more of a projection for enrollment next year. But again, there's some subjectivity to the number of students in that school and how we count them. Likewise, there's subjectivity to what do we include or not include in the district's costs. What should or shouldn't be included in the costs that are directly associated with school. We can pick every one of these apart and produce a different calculation that tells the same story. It costs more to educate students in micro schools than it does in small schools. That's the story. When we start to look more specifically at some of the figures, so these are, and again, enrollment projections are fluid. This is current thinking about what we might expect enrollment to be at each of these schools next year. This is looking at FY22 projected operating costs for those schools. You can see that line by school. Then separating out the debt that the two schools might have. And again, that's not total debt, but those are the debt payments that would be made in FY22. Gives you the total operational and debt service by school across the elementary schools. Then we look at the district costs, and you can see some categories of those district costs, like what we talked about on the slide before, and taking the total district cost and apportioning that out based on the number of students that are there. And you can see what the total district cost would be. We then take those number of students, we look at the operational and debt service, we look at the total district costs that are allocated to each of those schools, and you can get the total school cost plus the total district cost. Divide that by the number of students, and you get a cost per pupil. Some are interested in, well, what if we didn't include the debt, and what if we didn't include the district allocation? What then would happen? And you can see a similar story plays out. you can add and subtract and delete, and you can change the variables, but the story stays the same. It costs more in MAUSD to educate students in micro schools than it does in small schools. However you manipulate this, I believe that's the story that rings true. And to me, that's at the crux of why we're having the conversations we're having and why we're talking about how do we address this. We have a financial crisis. If we believe there are less efficiencies in micro schools than small schools, which I believe, then creating efficiencies by bringing students together helps us be more efficient with our dollars and reduces the risk of students losing the support and services they need. And that's the whole basis for my recommendation. And I think it's at the heart of the challenge that we face. And so that's where, and I sort of already addressed this, but there are a lot of folks out there that want to say, but if you don't include this, or if you calculate it this way, yes, we can get a lot of different numbers if we want to slice and dice this in different ways. I don't disagree. I also promise you these numbers will change. Almost all of the information that's on here is fluid. What I don't think changes is the story. It costs more to educate a student in MAUSD in a micro school than it does in a small school. And that's okay. If we choose to maintain our current structure of schools, that's okay. And know that it's going to continue to cost more in the micro schools to provide equitable support and services to students, and know that that's a commitment we're going to continue to make. That's, as long as I'm superintendent, that's a commitment I'm going to make, because there's nothing in our ends that say achieve equitable spend or equal spending per student across schools. And there's a lot that says achieve equitable outcomes for students across schools.
Patrick, I can see Sandy Lee's hand up, but I don't know if it's from before or now.
And I can stop sharing if that's helpful. I don't know if people are going to want to refer back to the presentation, but I'll stop sharing and I can always come back to it if need be. If I can find which screen I'm going to get my stop sharing option from. There we go. I'm looking at you all on screen 1. My presentation's on screen 3, and screen 2 is where I have to stop sharing.
That was the end of the presentation, right, Patrick? Because I didn't. Okay, great. I didn't want to interrupt the presentation, but I did have a question, because, you know, I've given, when I watched some of the prior meetings before being on the board, you know, I thought a lot about how the whole district changed when Act 46 was passed and we all became part of MAUSD. And, you know, the ability for towns to make their own budgets, to see what their costs were, to make those types of decisions, to pay more from their taxes. Every town had that ability to say, yeah, our micro school is more expensive and we'll approve that budget and we'll pay for it. And they wouldn't make other towns, except because we had a unified, you know, budget in the high school because all our kids there. But when it came to our town schools, you know, we had the ability, you know, not to burden other towns, right? We had the ability to say, we'll pass our budget or not. And a town got to make that decision. And so, you know, I really do believe when Act 46 came about, it was to try to really gain efficiencies in administration, not about closing schools, and forget about the definition of closing, but, you know, really doing these kind of changes, right? I mean, closing is going to be a disputed issue, but in essence, it feels like that if you actually really close the school, right? Because that would save quite a bit, you know, financially instead of the innovation sites. So, and so when we look at these numbers and we say, you know, these micro school cost more, I don't think people are disagreeing, but the ability for people to do anything about that and not be a burden to other towns has literally been taken away. You know, and I don't know how to remedy that. I don't understand, you know, the impediments. I'm sure it's complicated in the way Act 46 came about, but it seems so counterproductive because towns sometimes were willing to pay more for their schools because it was a serious value to their community. And so for them, they got to choose whether it's Starksboro or let's say one day they say Moncton's going to close. It could be any of us, right? Who knows what's going to happen with numbers down the road, but the town had the ability to say, is it worth paying more? And if I understand correctly, they don't even have a choice anymore. And now we unfortunately have created this sort of this town against that town, and you're burdening us on, but yet no ability to remedy that, at least the way it currently is. And maybe I'm misunderstanding, but that's just sort of the overall impression I'm getting. And I appreciate the presentation, but I don't know how to get to the point where do we have to be against each other? Do you know what I mean? In terms of these numbers versus what are the way to free ourselves from that? And I don't know. I put that out there.
No, I appreciate it. I wouldn't say that you're misunderstanding, but I would point out that from my perspective, you're missing the primary purpose of Act 46, which was equity and outcomes for students. Mm-hmm. And I think that what you described as each town got to do whatever they wanted is the root of inequity for students.
Well, they have to do a minimum, but if you need to pay more to be able to provide them with that, because you're assuming that a smaller school like Robinson and Lincoln isn't providing equitable outcomes, right? And I don't, but I think we are, and granted, maybe you're spending more because we're taking the money out. Like it's about what are we actually providing? I think Lincoln does get equitable outcomes. So I don't know how that ties in.
Well, and where I was going with that, so basically when different places can make decisions independent of anything else, and they can go in any direction, that is a recipe for creating inequities, not intentionally creating inequities, but that's the result. And I think I don't see it so much as, and this is why it's unfortunate that the process has gone where it has with the cost per pupil and the discrepancies. It's really unfortunate because it is creating this us and them situation, which we're kind of missing the point of being a unified district and pursuing equity for all of our students, because we should all, ideally, the folks in Bristol should be as concerned about the kids in Lincoln and Starksboro and Moncton and all 5 of our towns as they are the kids in Bristol. That's how a unified district behaves. We're not quite behaving that way at the moment. And I hope we can get back there because, as a former Bristol resident, if my taxpayer dollars are distributed in a way that may not give as much to Bristol kids as it does to some other town, but I know that that's in service to ensuring that all students in our school district are getting equitable opportunities and outcomes and supports. That's what I want it to do. That's why we are a unified district. That's how we behave as an admin team. That's how I'm leading this district. That is what's most important. And we're missing that when our focus is on the discrepancy in cost per pupil. It's a reality. It's a factor in our conversation. It's real. But the goal should not be, let's make spending equal. The goal needs to remain, let's ensure equitable outcomes. And that's why I've been so hesitant to just hand over the calculations that people want to see how we derive those numbers. Because as I said, you can calculate it 100 different ways and get 100 different numbers, whatever's going to support your theory. But the story is no different. And as long as we continue to support all of our schools, I'm going to continue to support equitable outcomes and unequal spending.
I just had a quick follow-up in terms of before we became a unified district and towns were able to adjust their budgets according to their actual, their costs, were the outcomes inequitable?
Yeah, I would say there were definitely inequities across the districts prior to merger, and there still are. And we've been working to address those inequities one by one, year by year.
I mean, I'll ask another. I don't want to take too much time. I just wondering what those inequities were, but I can wait for another time.
Okay. Liz?
I really appreciate the presentation. It felt like a really great example of leadership and the kind of leadership that I would hope for. And also, I think with the question you were asking just now, Sandy, there was Act 60 before. And my understanding is that we weren't just stable. Like I know, or I believe that a representative from Moncton had said they had cut their budget or level funded and their taxes were still going up because Act 60 did have towns subsidizing other towns even before Act 46.
That's a good point. With a statewide property tax and a statewide education tax, I should say, higher spending towns are to an extent subsidized by lower spending towns. Like that's how the education tax system works. So everyone helps pay for higher spending districts. That's why the bond, that's why there's sort of a moratorium on even going out for bonds right now, because so South Burlington was looking at a $209 million bond or something like that. All school districts, all taxpayers in Vermont would be helping to pay for that bond. It would impact everyone's tax rate. So that's a pretty concrete example of how that works and is important to consider.
Kristen Blanchett.
There we go. Lots of hands up. And I don't know why my hand is so pink, although it really is. Some of the kids I work with have figured out how to make their hands different colors, which is important, and they haven't trained me yet. So anyway, so I'm gonna just, Sandy, you might have seen me on some of the horrible videos that you had to watch of our meetings. I can't imagine doing that, but thank you for doing it. I know you're always so thorough. But, so I'm just gonna say that what I've said a few times is that I've been involved with the board and paying attention for about 11 years, right? And so, so I was talking about the free and reduced lunch kids and the IEP kids are on a flat line. There, and we won't have test scores and stuff for now. And that's certainly not the only way to measure achievement or children or anybody, but it's what we were using. And that we hadn't been able to improve that for 10 years. And so, Patrick, I appreciate your discussion about equity and your presentation. Because those are the kids, the other kids are going to probably do okay no matter where they are. But the kids that need the most supports in those micro schools are the ones that are going to continue to not be able to reach the proficiency range, right? The other thing is, I think that, families are already voting with their feet in the fact that Chittenden South, South Burlington, Essex, even Middlebury, I mean, these other towns where if you look on Zillow, right, and you look at what are the test scores, what are the results, how do people rate the school district, those are the places that people are moving generally, aside from our school district. So could we take a big poll of the world and say how many people want to move to a town that has a micro school even? I don't know. I know I would do it personally, but just my kids would probably do okay in a micro school, thankfully, very, very thankfully, right? But a lot of people's kids won't do as well in a micro school. I don't think. Nancy's shaking her head. So where do the supports come from? So I just wanted to speak to some of the things you spoke to and just my thoughts and feelings about it. And I do work in 3 elementary schools. I'm not a teacher, but I see the things that those larger schools can provide to those kids that I'm talking about. So anyway, I just wanted to sort of speak to what you said. And thank you, Patrick, for the presentation.
Krista. Thanks for being patient. Everybody keeps shifting around and
No, that's okay. This is a great and such an important conversation. I appreciate the way you've laid it out, Patrick, and I really appreciate your questions, Sandy. And it's, I think, complex and layered. One thing that I worry about, I do think that towns can and schools can develop their own budgets and figure out ways to serve kids. And I think the capacity is there to maybe do it in a way that ensures great outcomes. But each town has a different ability to do that based on the economics of that town. And so, I think we have to, in Vermont, it's less about zip code because, 5 towns share the same zip code, but it might be more about town line. So in one of our 5 towns, you might be able to ask taxpayers to pay more to support what your school needs. And in another town, you might not be able to. And I think that's part of the conversation that we can't ignore. And I think the other thing that is worth more conversation is how do we measure outcomes? And what does it mean if not all of our kids are succeeding, and how are we gauging that? And there are 2 separate conversations, but I think they're both really important to have. But the one that's resonating most with me right now is that deep concern I have that not all of our towns have the ability to fund our schools in the same way. And so, we're trying to lift all of our towns up, recognizing that they come from really different economic places and abilities.
Okay, Dave Sharp, thanks for waiting.
Thank you. So this is a really important conversation. And Patrick, I want to thank you so much for your comments in response to Sandy's concerns that she raised. I've spent nearly 20 years of my life on school financing, on the inequities in schools, on Act 68 and Act 46 as an author of Act 46, one of them. I may live to regret ever writing that piece of legislation. Our hope was for more equity, as you point out, Patrick, our hope in the legislature. So Act 60, before Act 60, we had extreme variation in the amount of money spent per pupil in various school districts across the state, mostly related to the property value in those communities. So you had Stowe and you had various other communities that with a penny on their tax rate could raise, $500,000. And in Bristol, with a penny on the tax rate, you could raise 5,000. And it just was, there was a reason for the court decision that came out of Addison County, actually. And Act 60 and 68 went a long way, although it is flawed. And one of the really big flaws that we were working on at the same time we were working on Act 46 is the fact that low-income communities do subsidize higher income communities. And that's really wrong. That's backwards. My really huge fear that I've come face to face with is that these higher income communities that have a high value for education, Ripton, Weybridge, Peacham, Marlborough, Wyndham, Lincoln, are contemplating leaving the districts in which they reside so they can spend more money on their pupils and have wealthier towns be able to have more amenities, French and full-time nursing and all the wonderful things that we all want for our kids. And if that's the eventual outcome of Act 46, is that we have these isolated communities that decide to go the way of choice or private independent schools to educate their students and public schools fall by the wayside, I will die an unhappy man. We do need to think as a district, and we need to do the best we can for all the children in this district. I am loath to close community schools, and that would be my very last choice. But if that's the only way, and it comes to that, then I'll go that way. My really big concern right now is we should be putting the kids in the best schools, not the ones easiest to get to by car, or not the ones without debt, or not the ones for this reason or that reason. We should be sending our kids to the best schools in our district and where the kids have the best outcomes. And that's why I want to learn a lot more about what's the climate in the schools, what's the turnover of the staff in the schools, what are the results that we're having with the health of our children in these schools, as we design how we want the future of education in our district to be. I'm rambling on and I apologize, but I do want to thank you, Patrick, for the way you characterize what we're trying to accomplish with education in our district and in our state. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, Kevin.
Well, this will probably not come off very well, but I live in Bristol, so you know, Bristol of the five towns has the reputation that the lowest test scores, you know, the place you don't want to go and live, and on and on and on. And it's really frustrating to also realize that we don't have the equity or perceived equity, and it's not based on test scores, it's based on anecdotal information at this point, because we haven't done test scores. But when we did a few years ago, they kind of bore out the same conclusion. And, you know, in certain ways, Act 46 has actually probably benefited Bristol, because there's a little wider view from the people or the administration or the funding for the town. But it's still, in my opinion, has a long ways to go as far as the equity statement is concerned, with respect to how it's perceived. And, you know, perception a lot of times is reality. And I've been excited being on this board and learning about the efforts that Patrick and the administration has made to develop an MTSS system, which I can't understand why a lot of people aren't happy with it, but it just makes so much sense to really go and focus on bringing along students that struggle. And to see that improving in Bristol is exciting. To see it being compromised with a distribution system of campuses is not a great feeling, because it just doesn't get Bristol out of the situation that it's in and has been in for a long time. And Kristen's absolutely right that the people that need the kiddos that need the help the most just somehow are not making progress. And to end up with a stronger system of support by the way we manage our schools makes a lot of sense to me. And I think it, you know, particularly from my point of view, and I understand it's pretty parochial because, you know, there are people in surrounding towns that have different opinions on how all that comes about. But it will go a long ways, I think, to serving at least the needs of Bristol, and maybe making Bristol a school where the surrounding towns don't want their kids to go to, and it would be okay if they actually went there.
Sandy, is your hand up again, or is that from before?
This is really helpful for me all, and I appreciate your patience with me as I'm catching up on a lot of things I'm sure you've already gone through. And thank you, David. You know, it's in terms of the, you know, the equity question, but also saying, you know, what is working and why. You know, I hear you, Kevin, when you say about the concerns about the Bristol school, which I'm not as familiar with, and I hope I will be, since I used to be the high school board member, so I'm not as familiar with the Bristol local school, and actually not really aware of their struggles or their scores if I wasn't paying enough attention, you know, in my prior work. But you know, it makes me wonder, it's the largest, it's not a micro school, it's the small school in all the 5 towns. And yet, from, if I'm to take what you're saying, is it seems to be the school having one of the major struggles in providing those equities. And so as we move forward, I'm totally have in mind the overall view for the whole district, but I also want to be able to know the ties between moving kids to different schools and how, just by having more numbers, will that achieve the improvement that we want for all the kids. Like, I need to know that, like, I'm looking forward to learning about how these things are actually linked, you know, and hearing from principals, hearing from teachers. You know, they make this their life's work. I bet they know, or they have some really good ideas, like as Kristen pointed out to some extent. And I look forward to hearing about that, because despite the fact it's a bigger school, it's still struggling. And is it just a socioeconomic issue? I'd hate to think that, because we're not going to probably be able to fix that anytime soon. But I think it's maybe other things, hopefully. I don't know, we can improve them all.
I'd just like to encourage us all to, I completely agree, perception becomes reality, even if it's an ill-informed perception. So I would just want to caution us as we're starting to make assumptions about successes or not, or successful schools or unsuccessful schools. That analysis, if we're really going to be looking at data, goes pretty deep if we want to really try to have an apples to apples comparison. Because I don't know that I would agree with the statement that Bristol is a struggling school when compared to other schools. So just caution us to check assumptions.
Yeah. Liz?
And then I would just suggest it's a long report, but the Picus and Odin report. I believe, I mean, I'm sure we'll hear more about it with the DMJ, but they that really goes into details about like tutoring and just all the different ways. They looked at schools in Vermont, and they found ones that had, I believe, increased their test scores by an average of 10 points. And they looked very different. They had very different challenges, but they had a lot of similarities. And that was the path. That's the path that I believe we're taking. That's the path we're following. So it is really exciting. There are improvements that would improve outcomes for all students, and most certainly Bristol Elementary, you know, I believe is a wonderful school, and I've seen wonderful things happen there. So, but yes, the perceptions can be different around from different people with different experiences.
I do have to add, we've got 2 data points that Bristol Elementary is a very successful school, but boy, you know, that it's not a universally held position. That's why I said something about perception versus reality. And you know, you look around on Zillow and, you know, educationdigger.org and all those kind of things, and it's not a great picture.
Kristen?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that if we can get off the path of, you know, family income level having the largest predictive effect on school achievement, that's what we're trying to get off of, and how to study schools and school districts that do that. And I know Patrick's sort of working on that, but right now that's our biggest predictive factor. And so That's what we're trying to bust.
Okay. All right, so it's getting way past our time. It's 9:50. We've got a couple more things to go. I really appreciate this honest conversation. I will work on gathering, theming the questions, and I am going to make a call to VSBA before I take any further steps, because I really think they frown on some suggestions, and I'm going to get clarity before I do anything. And then, so it may not come back to you as you think, but I'm going to get some clarity before I do any of that. We have two more discussion items. One's the survey, and I know Krista and Rob have worked on the narrative, and I really want to give them time to speak, but I don't think we have another 2 hours in us to go through that information. And then the discussion around alternative proposals, I think we can table and fit it in one of our next couple of meetings. Rob and Krista, can I touch in with you two about the survey? And I know we talked originally about 2 hours, but other stuff has sort of taken over that time. What do you two feel would be the best way to do the work justice around that?
I can jump in, Rob, if you'd like, or if you want to add anything. I feel like we can take our cue from the board. I mean, we took everyone's feedback, board and community, and work to create an executive summary and to shorten the presentation and to provide the comments and links to all of that. So I don't see the individual links on the agenda, but I'm pretty sure they're all within the executive summary.
Yes.
So, we can discuss it at another meeting. We can, whatever folks want to do. It is really late. So if people want to do a deep dive, now is not the time. But at the very least, you have the info there, and we can decide when to dig in and how.
Steve, Rooney?
I just want to give a big shout of thanks to both of you. I mean, it's really a big lift, and I think it was very well done and very helpful.
Dave Sharp?
So just a couple short things. I sure wish when those numbers were released, especially to the newspaper, that they'd been accompanied with the presentation you just made, because they needed to go hand in hand. The other thing is, I would like us to invite Bill Schubart to come and talk to us about education in Vermont. I think it would be helpful for the board to hear his perspective.
So do you want to table the last two items C and D, or is there something else you have in mind?
What's alternative proposals, Don?
I think that was more, Patrick, refresh my memory. Is that more around probably what we talked about through the proposal request process, I think, wasn't it? I don't think.
Yeah. It's a bit of a blur for me right now.
Yeah, it is.
The conversation earlier went a lot of different directions, and I think covered what we needed to cover around the process and timeline and all those factors.
Yeah.
So this wasn't left over from a previous agenda, was it, when we were going to be doing this as a facilities meeting to start? We were going to look at alternative proposals in this timeline?
It's possible. I'm drawing a blank because I remember adding the proposal request process. So It may have been.
It might have been in the earlier timeline. We were going to actually talk about alternative proposals.
Yep. So, okay, if you'd like to table, I guess I need a motion if you want to table the survey discussion, or.
I move to table the rest of the agenda and move to adjourn.
I can work on the table part right now.
Second the table.
And Steve Rooney seconds. Any Kevin?
So we're looking to table items C and D underneath 6, right? Not the rest of the agenda.
Right. That's all we can do right now because we have to allow for public comment. Is that clear with everybody that we can table C and D, but we have to allow for public comment in order to finish up our meeting?
I amend my motion to agree with that.
Okay. And Steve, are you fine with that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. All those in favor of, you're sort of most of you on the same page. So all those in favor of tabling the survey discussion to a future meeting, give me a thumbs up or say aye.
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 All right. I'm seeing every. Yep. Okay. All right. That passes. All right. Now let's move on to public comment. And Herb, thanks for waiting.
Yeah, thanks. Very interesting meeting. I have to say I am probably more upset by the discussion and presentation about per pupil spending as I have been in a long time. Lincoln, they're a great target, right? Those folks in the mountains and the spending, they cost too much. And boy, if we close their school, we'll get more resources for Bristol. Because that's the message, that was what was put out, and that's what people are thinking. I'm going to bring up Starksboro, okay? Starksboro is probably one of the most, I wouldn't say the most, I don't know the numbers. But Kevin, Starksboro is pretty economically diverse. We have lots of kids who are in the same situation as your kids. We like our school. We think that our school has done pretty well. It's all, you talk about money. We're talking, and you talk, Kevin, about, well, we just want a local school. We want a good education for our students, and we think that Robinson has been doing a good job at it. Patrick, you made your presentation. I think you left out a bunch of stuff. I think you left out about pay grades and steps and the experience of the teachers in each school and how that might factor into the cost. I'm just, you're trying to build, I would think the first order of business for the board should be to try to build trust. And you're not doing it right now. You have to think about how to build trust in the community so that when you make your final decision, people that can accept it instead of fighting it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. The next one on my screen, I'm sorry if I'm going out of order. Everybody's switched around. Paul Forlenza.
Hi, Paul Forlenza from Lincoln on the select board. 3 quick things. One of the questions that comes up, sort of reading between the lines, is how many groups are going to make proposals? One of the ways to determine that is to ask for a letter of intent from each group. So if a group is going to make a proposal, they would submit a letter of intent by some date, like April 1st. It doesn't commit them to, but it says, this is what we're planning to do. The second point is to do apples to apples comparison between proposals. It's going to be critical that there be a common set of data points that are used. And And then every group can take those data points, sort of those common blocks, and build their projections. But we need to start with something common. And the third point is that on your process, one of the process documents, you say you're going to evaluate the submittals between May 4th and May 11th. My suggestion is that's really way too short a time, that you ought to figure out how to give yourselves adequate time to do that. So thank you.
Thank you. Nate Richardson.
Hi, yeah. Can I ask a question during this time, or is it just comments?
It's typically comments.
Okay.
Because we don't know what the question is going to be. I'm not sure if we're prepared to answer it.
Yeah, I guess my question / comment would be back earlier in the meeting, the original proposal was being talked about, and it was brought up that phase 1 and phase 2 are independent, completely independent of each other. I'm under the impression, based on the presentation, that in order for the proposal to be successful, phase 2 must occur. That looking out through 2026, the school district will be well beyond the threshold if phase 2 does not occur. So I guess I guess that's kind of like a question comment, because if I'm wrong, I want that understanding to be, I want to make sure I'm understanding it correctly. And if I'm correct, then I don't think that they are independent at all if the success of phase 1 depends entirely on the success of phase 2. And that's the impression that I'm under right now.
Okay. Thank you. Sally Burrell.
Hi, I really appreciate how the meeting went and everyone being able to share. And it's been really a great meeting, even though long. I wanted to just bring up the idea of equity, that there's so many ways to define equity. And I think that's really important to look at because things like being close to home and, those kind of things might be as important as having certain services. And, life is changing, as we've seen through COVID, and what matters to us and what is nourishing to us, what's healthy, what keeps us grounded. There are a whole lot of things that I think can offer equity in it. So I think we really have to be careful about what we decide makes an equitable school. Thanks.
Dawn.
Yes.
Dawn, so I don't know if it's appropriate to comment on Nate's comment because I'm the one that made the statement, but I can clarify what I was thinking if that's okay.
We typically don't get into a back and forth, but if you're just going to provide some information, I guess,
No, that's fine. I'll leave it at the way it is.
I appreciate that, Kevin. I could contact you afterwards and we could talk about it too.
If you want to.
Yeah. Thank you.
Great. And let me see if anybody's over here. Herb, is your hand up again, or is that from before?
I'm done.
Okay. And Sally, your hand is from before? Nope, everybody moved again. Okay. All right. Chris, do you have the meeting evaluation up?
Gotcha.
All right.
All right. What is the level of engagement of all board members, high or low? I'm gonna go with high. I think we heard from just
high. I'm seeing thumbs.
All right. Was the agenda followed? Yes or no? Pretty much.
Yep.
Any comments?
Any comments?
Okay. Does the chair effectively establish the agenda and materials for distribution to the board? Yes or no? Yes. Any comments? Okie dokie.
And happy 20, I believe this is your 20-year anniversary of being on the board, Dawn. So
it is. Thank you.
Thank you for your service.
Okay. Is the chair effective in fostering a professional culture regarding fair and open deliberation, full participation of all members, and ensuring the integrity of the board process? Yes or no?
Yes.
Any comments?
Rob has his hand up. So.
Yeah, I'd like when we still had that sort of, you'd go down the list, Don, if people had something to say.
Okay.
I'd appreciate that. I guess going down the road.
Okay. All right, great. And Steve, did you have something?
No, I was just going to say I thought you did a great job.
Thank you. Good.
Other feedback for the chair? What went well with the meeting?
Well, we got our proposals. We're gonna get our proposals. That's a great thing. And getting the teacher and student feedback also.
What suggestions do you have for ways to improve future meetings? That's a wrap.
All right. How about a motion to adjourn at 10:07?
So moved.
Okay.
I'll second Andrew.
And Andrew. All right. All those in favor of adjourning, give me a thumbs up or say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Thank you all for hanging on and staying with us through this long meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Next week.
Dawn?
Yes?
Who made the motion?
Dave Sharp and Andrew.
Okay. I got Andrew. I didn't get Dave. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.